Joining us now is Georgia's 6th District Republican, Dr. Tom Price, one of the leading conservatives in the United States, is on the forefront of every major issue. Great to have you with us, sir.
Oh, thanks so much, John. Good to be back with you.
Always a pleasure. So much going on. I want to get right to the Internal Revenue Service scandal. And now Lois Lerner put on administrative leave after she pleaded the fifth, but then did really plead the fifth, Congressman, because she made an opening statement. Everybody that knows the law knows you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. Where's this thing going to lead, sir?
Well, we don't know, and we're going to keep working on it because the administration clearly, through their agents, has been targeting conservative groups, and not just Tea Party groups. This is religious groups. This is conservative groups across the spectrum. They've also, we believe, leaked information on particular donors, and they've targeted donors for auditing through the IRS. So this is just the beginning. This isn't the end of this process, and Lois Lerner will at some point have to answer questions about how it was all started and whose idea it was, and we're going to continue the difficult and methodical process of getting to the bottom of it.
We just had former Speaker of the Georgia House, Mark Burkholder, on, and he said the same thing. He said that he has heard that the next wave of this is going to be individual donors to Republican and conservative causes and candidates that he believes, from talking to people, have been targeted. Do you indeed think that's real?
I believe that to be the case because I've had so many individuals who have contacted me personally and communicated with our office specifically that they were targeted. They believe they were targeted. You've got case after case after case of individuals who have never either been audited or had once in their lifetime. And then when they increase their activity with conservative groups, either donating to conservative groups or donating to groups that believe that the president's health care law was so terribly flawed, that then they underwent an audit. So there are just too many numbers to believe that it's a coincidence. But you can't just assume that. You've got to go through the methodical process of getting to the bottom of it, finding somebody in the IRS who will finally stand up and be honest with the American people, and then hold the administration, the Secretary of the Treasury, and whoever needs to be held to account.
Well, we'll have to see how it plays out. Certainly a scary situation.
It's absolutely chilling. To have the federal government use the incredible power and authority of the Internal Revenue Service, something that everybody fears, as their political arm, which is potentially what has occurred, is chilling. And then you've got Sarah Hall Ingram on top of this, the individual who was in charge of the tax-exempt division for a period of time. She now is heading up the IRS division for the enforcement of the president's health care law. She needs to step back as well.
How did that happen? I mean, how do you take somebody that was embroiled in the middle of the scandal and then put her in charge of enforcing Obamacare? How does that logically happen?
Well, she was moved over before this blew up, but Stephen Miller, who is the acting chairman, the acting director of the IRS, was the one who, before our committee a week ago, said that he decided she had done such a great job, his words, great job, and was such a wonderful civil servant that she was the one that needed to be in charge of the implementation and the enforcement of the health care law. So what I asked him specifically was, if this individual is such a great civil servant and she did such a great job, then can we expect the same kind of activity of the IRS in terms of their intrusion into people's lives personally and use of the IRS for nefarious means when she's there to enforce Obamacare? And it's very, very troubling. So, as I say, I think we're just at the beginning of this. I don't think we're at the end of it at all.
You know, the other issue, and Congressman, you'd be able to comment on this with authority, being a man of medicine, is that ostensibly she would have access to everybody's medical records as well, right?
Well, that's the question that I asked, because one of the Democrats on the panel said, well, nobody would ever have access to medical records, and Miller said that was the case. They wouldn't. But what I posed was it was unnecessary, Miller's words, the IRS's words, unnecessary for them to have access to the kind of activity that they did and has now been shown to do in the tax-exempt status area. You know, they were asking for the content of church groups' prayers. They were asking for book lists of books that book groups were reading and a book report on the books in order tax-exempt. That's why I call this chilling. If it was unnecessary to have those, then it would be unnecessary but also possible for the IRS to gain access to your medical records. That's why I believe it is absolutely an affront to sensibility to have this woman in charge of this of the IRS division overseeing the enforcement and implementation of the president's health care law.
Unbelievable. This is the John Fredericks Show. It's 48 minutes past the hour. We're with 6th District Republican Congressman from Georgia, Dr. Tom Price. Congressman, I want to switch over, if I can, to immigration, the Gang of Eight bill coming out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I don't think there's any question now in our mind that is going to pass the U.S. Senate, come to the House. So what do you make of it?
Well, it may indeed come through the Senate and over to the House, but the House of Representatives and the Speaker has identified this, and we have talked as a conference on this. We are going to work through this process again in a slow, methodical, deliberate way, in step-by-step fashion. And I don't believe we'll take up the Senate bill. I think we will address the issues of border security and the internal enforcement and the entry-exit a visa debacle that we have right now. We have a terribly broken immigration system, and it needs to be fixed. But it needs to be fixed in a way that, in a stepwise fashion, that allows the American people to regain trust in the federal government that it can actually run this program. It clearly has failed in the federal government in running the IRS. I believe it's failed in running the immigration system, and it's got to prove once again that it can work in a positive way and in a way that respects the rule of law and enforces the rule of law. And until that happens, then I don't think that we'll be able to see any major changes to the immigration system.
So as it stands now, as is written and passed through the Judiciary Committee, do you favor the Gang of Eight bill?
Absolutely not. I don't think it has the kind of security for the nation to be certain that whatever internal enforcement, path of legalization, whatever you want to call it, would have any merit whatsoever, because there's no way to know that the border would be secured and that the processes of entry-exit visa status will have been improved. Look, we have one of the bombers at the Boston massacre left the United States, went to the country where he had gained asylum from, and came to the United States, went to that country for a period of time, and then re-entered on an expired student visa. This is a system that is terribly broken, and that portion absolutely must be fixed first before we even consider any expansion. So and I don't believe that the Senate bill does that. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a terribly broken immigration system, and we've got to get that fixed, because the only way to improve our jobs and economy situation is to make certain that is repaired.
Without a doubt. Congressman, every day more and more information is now getting leaked out about the Benghazi crisis. Now we're understanding that beyond the narrative being changed, that we don't know exactly why some assets were not deployed there. We had Congressman Forbes on a week ago, Randy Forbes, who said that if they could have simply gotten 3 Marines out there or gotten an F-16 buzzing overhead, that we could have saved these lives. Where do you think we are right now with the Benghazi investigation, and what else do you think has to be done?
Well, first, you can't talk about this topic without saying once again that our hearts and prayers go out to the families of the 4 who were murdered and whose government did not stand up for them. It's just an absolute tragedy. And the method, the way we need to proceed at this point is to get to the bottom of who made the decision not to allow American assets, U.S. assets, the men and women who stand up every single day to protect our liberty and our freedom, and we're ready to go. We're ready to go protect Americans who were in harm's way. Somebody in the administration made the decision for them not to go. And that has to be answered so that, once again, we can regain that trust. You'll hear me coming back to trust over and over again with this administration, because I believe that this administration has lost the trust of the American people on the IRS issue, on immigration, on national security, on the issue of Benghazi, and it has to be regained. This is a very, very dangerous time in our nation's history when the consent of the governed needs to be improved and regained, and not not continue to have an administration that clearly tramples over not just the rule of law, but activity over and over and over and over again that makes it suspect about who it's representing.
And then, speaking of trust, what about the intrusion into the Associated Press? What do you make of that?
Well, this again, I think that what we heard from the Associated Press and what we've heard from some other news outlets, this may be the tip of the iceberg here, and then you've got Holder investigating Holder. The Attorney General recusing himself for what reason we know not. So this is an authority that is only provided to the Attorney General for gaining access to news reporters' information when it is an imminent threat to the United States. Clearly, that was not the case in many of the instances, and again, we'll get to the bottom of that. But this is an administration that is I believe, flaunting the law, is not living up to its commitment and its responsibilities, and the American people, I think, are sick and tired of it. Hopefully, the AP issue will have the mainstream media, the press, the fourth estate, now fulfill its role in a free society and ask the difficult questions that it has refused to ask over the last 4 years.
Well, I think the clock for them is starting to expire. We've only got about a half a minute. Congressman, final question. Have you made a decision whether or not you're going to put your hat in the ring for the upcoming United States Senate seat that's going to be open via the retiring Saxby-Chambliss in Georgia?
Yes, we have. A couple of weeks ago, we announced that we wouldn't throw our hat in the ring at this time. We've got incredible opportunities and incredible work, important work that needs to be done in the House of Representatives as Vice Chair of the Budget and these other items that we've discussed. This is an absolutely pivotal time in our nation's history, and to remove oneself from the field, as it were, for 18 months, which is what happens when you get into a political battle of that nature, is just not what I think is responsible or appropriate at this time.
Well, it's great to have you stay in the House. We appreciate, Congressman, your fine work and standing up for what you believe in. You've always done that. I've been blessed with having you as my congressman in Georgia and being able to spend so much time covering you as a journalist. You have a fabulous weekend, and please say hi to your lovely wife, Betty. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. She sends her best, John, and happy Memorial Day. And remember what Memorial Day is all about. God bless America.
All right, Congressman from the 6th District of Georgia. He was my congressman for a long time. I also covered him extensively when I was a journalist in Georgia. This is the John Fredericks Show.